It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Marc Scaringi Show. The Marc Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Marc is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Marc Scaringi.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Marc Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And you can join us on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live. We're here on WHP 580 and iHeartRadio. And you can call in 717-540-0580, or you can comment live on Harrisburg 100. And you're welcome to comment, ask questions, and participate in the show. And today we're going to talk about the release of the special counsel report, Robert Mueller's report on the allegations that President Trump or officials of his campaign engaged in any collusion with the agents of the Russian government. And we'll also try to answer the question, did President Trump obstruct justice? And I invite my listeners to call in and let me know what you think. Did President Trump obstruct justice? You can call in at 717-540-0580. Now, according to the regulation governing the Office of Special Counsel, the Special Counsel is to write a confidential report and submit it to the Attorney General. And interestingly, that regulation has been violated because this report is not confidential. The report has been disseminated to the public and to Congress and to people around the world who have access to the internet, and they can take a look at the report. So I just thought that was interesting that the regulation itself requires the report to be confidential, yet that has been violated. And the regulation requires the submission of the report to the Attorney General, not to Congress. And you'll listen to your congressmen and women down there in Washington, D.C., our Democratic congressmen and women, our friends down there in the Democratic Party. They are just beside themselves with the Attorney General Bill Barr's decision to hold a press conference to discuss the report before he disseminated the report to Congress, as if Congress has the right to the report, as if Special Counsel Robert Mueller was appointed by Congress and working for Congress and conducting an investigation for the United States Congress. None of that is true. All of that is false. Special Counsel does not work for Congress. Congress is in what we refer to as the legislative branch. The Office of Special Counsel is in what we refer to as the executive branch. We have separation of powers, as we learned in grade school. Yet Maxine Waters and many other congressmen and women from the Democratic side of the aisle seem not to grasp that very basic concept of the U.S. system of government. Nevertheless, Congress will get the report, has the report, and they'll initiate a variety of investigations, etc., convened by Democrats in order to try to trump up grounds to impeach the president. But let's talk about the executive summary of the report, because admittedly that's all I've been able to read at this point. I've been very much engaged otherwise in actually living life and practicing law and conducting my business and also cooking for the Easter holiday weekend. So I didn't have the time to read the 400 some pages, but I just finished the executive summary. In the first sentence of the second paragraph of the executive summary states, the Russian government interfered in the 2016 presidential election in sweeping and systematic fashion. And I've had a problem with this use of the word interfere from the beginning of this whole fake investigation and this fake scandal. What does interfere mean to you, my listeners? Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines interfere as to interpose in a way that hinders or impedes, come into collision or be in opposition. So did the Russian government itself or through its agents or associates hinder or impede our election? Did they prevent the 2016 presidential election from happening? Did they get into the ballot boxes and throw out the ballots for Hillary Clinton and stuff the ballot boxes for Donald Trump? Did they use their ability through the internet to somehow shut down voting booths and prevent Americans for voting for Hillary? None of those things happened. We had a 2016 presidential election, and Donald Trump won. So how is it that the agents or associates of the Russian government hacking into a Democratic National Campaign Committee emails and taking the emails of Hillary Clinton and John Podesta, her campaign chairman, which is clearly a crime. There's no question about that. That's a crime committed by Russians, Russian government actors or agents of the Russian government. That's a crime. But how is how is a Russian agent stealing an email from Hillary Clinton and giving it to DC Leaks or WikiLeaks? How is that interfering, hindering, impeding our election? I don't know how that is. But in any event, those were the grounds that were used by the FBI to open its investigation into these allegations of Trump-Russian collusion, or that was the terminology that was used. They were going to investigate interference, and interference, of course, is not really a legal term. It's not really a criminal a crimes code term, but that's the term that was used for Special Counsel Robert Mueller, secondly, and firstly, FBI Director Jim Comey to investigate the Trump campaign. So back in July of 2016, the FBI opened its investigation based upon a tip it received from some government official that a low-ranking brief member of then-candidate Trump's foreign policy advisory team, a group of people who met a couple of times and talked about foreign policy, George Papadopoulos, apparently had suggested that the Trump campaign, this is the tip that the FBI received, that the Trump campaign had received indications from the Russian government that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information damaging to Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. That's it. That's the alleged evidence the FBI used to open what it referred to as a counterintelligence operation, a tip it received from some, I think, foreign government official that George Papadopoulos had suggested that the Trump campaign was made aware that the Russian government could assist it through the release of these emails from Hillary Clinton. No evidence of any kind that Trump or the Trump campaign acted in light of that information, made any agreements in light of that information. So no evidence of any kind that the Trump campaign had an agreement or acted in accordance with an agreement regarding the hacked emails of Hillary Clinton. So really there was no legal basis to investigate the Trump campaign operatives. We'll talk more about this when we return from our brief commercial break. You're listening to The Marc Scaringi Show.
Now, more of Marc Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. And thanks for listening here on WHP 580 and iHeartRadio and my friends on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live. We are running live now. I apologize we weren't in the first segment. because I didn't hit the right button, but we're on live now, so you can comment live or you can call in 717-540-0580. Did President Trump obstruct justice? I want to know what you think. I'm talking about the executive summary. I'm in volume 1, the collusion part of it, because I'm just so wrapped up in this entire and how the whole thing about collusion is absolutely a fraud and fake. We're talking about what evidence the FBI had to open the investigation. It had a tip from some foreign government official through George Papadopoulos, a low-ranking member of the foreign policy team of the Trump campaign, that the Trump campaign had received indications from the Russian government that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information damaging to Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. That's it. That's the tip. And by the way, it doesn't even talk about hacked emails. It just says anonymous release of information. That's not evidence of a crime, by the way. Now, we know later on, we know that the Russians did hack the DNC emails. That's a crime. But simply sitting down and listening to someone say to you that they can assist your campaign through the anonymous release of information damaging to your opponent, that is not a crime. The listener is not committing a crime. It's not evidence of any crime being committed by the listener. Yet that is the evidence used by the FBI to open a criminal investigation? No, because they didn't have any evidence that a crime was committed by George Papadopoulos. They opened a counterintelligence investigation. And remember, the purpose of a counterintelligence investigation is to determine what intelligence efforts, intelligence agents from foreign governments, typically hostile foreign governments, are using to infiltrate the national security network of the United States of America. That's really why you conduct a counterintelligence operation. It's to protect the national security interests of the American people. Do you feel protected, by the way, dear American people? Do you feel protected and safer now today because of Bob Mueller's special counsel investigation? Do you feel safer from attack by the Russian government as a result of this report? I don't. And by the way, the executive summaries don't detail any action that the United States government did to counter whatever it is that the Russian government did to quote, interfere, end quote, in our election. And we'll talk more about the actual conduct of the Russian government or its agents or whatever, the friends, associates, etc. But the FBI used a counterintelligence investigation. Remember, that's not a criminal investigation because the tip from this government official is not evidence that Trump or his campaign committed a crime. To launch a criminal investigation of the Trump campaign, the FBI would have needed probable cause to believe that Trump or his campaign had committed a crime. They didn't. So the closest crime would have been some version of criminal conspiracy. And to investigate for criminal conspiracy, the FBI would have needed proof that Trump agreed, or Trump officials agreed with the Russians to commit a crime, and that Trump or the Trump official had taken a substantial step in the direction of committing that crime. Those are the essential elements of conspiracy, the crime of conspiracy. No evidence was presented to the FBI then of conspiracy, nor is it included in the Mueller report. So they had no evidence of conspiracy from day one, and then 2 years later, no evidence of conspiracy by then-candidate Trump or any member of his campaign team. That's why for some years I've been saying this whole investigation is a fraud and a hoax. It should never have occurred. It's a travesty of justice that it did. In any event, the Mueller report, executive summary, of course, does not explain the reasons why it launched a counterintelligence over a criminal investigation in July of 2016. And remember, by opening a counterintelligence investigation, the FBI gets to use the top secret spy court, the FISA court, instead of a court authorized under the United States Constitution. And the FISA court is much more friendly to investigators and prosecutors because of its concern for the national security interests of the United States, for the safety, the personal physical safety of the American people. That's what the FISA court is designed to do, to interdict terrorists and terrorism and harmful acts by hostile foreign powers. That's what it's designed to do. I'm not so sure that Russian agents getting on Facebook and purchasing a Facebook ad that criticizes Hillary Clinton constitutes an act of terrorism and endangers the physical safety of the American people. Do you? Or am I just totally off base here? But that's why the FBI chose counterintelligence. They get the secret spy court to use, and they conduct all of this secret surveillance of the Trump campaign officials. Now, the executive summary declares that in the fall of 2016, 2 U.S. government agencies announced the Russian government had stolen emails and had attempted to interfere in the U.S. election process. Now, as I've explained, the U.S. election process is the process involved in casting votes to elect representatives and presidents. It's not about the constant chatter and gossip of the talking heads in D.C. and the political class about Hillary Clinton's emails. I mean, with or without the release of Hillary Clinton's emails, we had a fair and free election without any interference by the Russians or anyone else. I went to the voting booth. I cast my ballot for Donald Trump. I'm sure I have friends who went to the voting booth and cast a ballot for Hillary Clinton. Their ballots were not hindered or intercepted or interceded by a Russian agent. The votes were cast. It's just when they counted the votes, Hillary lost. And there is no and by the way, let me remind my listeners of a direct quote from a very esteemed American, the former president of the United States, Barack Obama, who said in October of 2016, when this whole thing about rigged elections was dominating the news, here's what your former president said, and I quote, "There is no serious person out there," as if, Barack Obama is the serious person, of course. "There is no serious person out there who would suggest somehow that you could even rig America's elections, in part because they are so decentralized in the number of votes involved. There is no evidence that has happened in the past and that there are instances in which that will happen this time. And so I invite Mr. Trump to stop whining and go try to make his case to get votes." Now, end quote. That's former President Barack Obama. Now, I will say that then candidate Trump did exactly what President Obama told him to do. He went out and he made his case and he got the votes and he defeated Hillary Clinton. Now, Obama said this 3 months after his FBI had opened an investigation into these fake allegations of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government to allegedly interfere in our elections. Stunning pronouncement from former President Barack Obama. And by the way, here are some of the earth-shattering conclusions of the Mueller report. Russians interfered in our election by getting on Facebook and posting stuff about Hillary Clinton. Wow. That is horrible, horrible election interference. Boy, I'm on Facebook just about all day long every day, and I should stop and get off it and do something more productive with my life. But I read hundreds of posts on Facebook from friends and political foes. Are we interfering in an election process by putting a post on Facebook that we like Trump or we don't like Trump? Really? That's it. That's the Russian interference in our election. They got on Facebook and they posted some stuff about Hillary Clinton. Now, the other example that Mueller includes in his report of Russian interference is they stole DNC emails and disseminated them. And by the way, it was the DNC that reported the Russians stole the emails. It wasn't even Mueller or Comey. It was the DNC who said, hey, we were hacked and the Russians stole our emails. So that wasn't the fact that we discovered the Russians stole DNC emails was not an accomplishment of Bob Mueller or Jim Comey. DNC, they hired a firm that came in. The firm said, oh, the Russians got your emails. So if the Russians publicized Hillary Clinton and John Podesta's emails, how is that interfering in our election process? Was anybody listening, any of my Democratic friends, I don't know if I have any, well, I hope I have some Democratic friends, was your vote hindered or stopped or prevented because the Russians grabbed emails from Hillary and John Podesta? I want to know. If you are a Democratic supporter and voter of Hillary Clinton, the 2016 presidential election, call in right now, 717-540-0580, and tell me if your vote was interdicted, stopped, prevented by reading about a Hillary Clinton email. We'll be back right after this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Marc Scaringi Show.
Let's get back to the Marc Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. You're welcome to call in 717-540-0580 and let me know whether you think President Donald Trump obstructed justice or not. 717-540-0580. And hello to my friends on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live. We're getting some comments live. Nancy McGill says, no, the president did not obstruct justice. And the organization PAIN, Pause All Immigration Now, also an important topic, believes that the president inquired about all of his options available and was advised of his options available. And we're going to talk more directly about the obstruction charges, hopefully, in this segment. But I'm still on the volume one, the collusion, the fake collusion. And now we talked about how the earth-shattering conclusions of the Mueller report are that the Russians interfered in our election by getting on Facebook and posting stuff about Hillary Clinton. Wow, that's horrible stuff. And the report then states the investigation identified numerous links between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. Links? What are links? Are links crimes? And I'm not so sure it shows any links between the Russian government and members of the Trump campaign. So we'll have to drill down on that. But the report does conclude the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. And perhaps that's because the FBI from the very beginning had zero evidence that the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government. Now let's digress for a moment to talk about my friend, the retired antitrust lawyer, Carl Hisserow from Susquehanna Township. Remember, when he wrote that op-ed back in Penn Live, back in early January of 2018, he wrote an op-ed entitled "Scaringi's Attacks on Mueller Were Baseless and Harmful." Now, this former antitrust lawyer, Carl Hisserow, criticized my legal analysis set forth in my columns from 2017 in Penn Live and Harrisburg Patriot News on the fake Trump-Russia collusion matter. Hisserow wrote, and I quote, "I don't know where Scaringi comes off concluding that the investigation has uncovered no evidence of collusion, given the numerous Trump officials and Russian officials that have been implicated so far to have met with each other on different occasions during the campaign." End quote. Really? I know where Scaringi comes off concluding the investigation uncovered no evidence of collusion. First, Mueller was not even investigating collusion. And I'll say this to my dear antitrust lawyer friend Carl Hisserow: collusion does not exist in the criminal code. It does exist in antitrust law, which is an area of law you practiced, but not in criminal law. So one could say, why don't you stay in your lane, as they say, and don't criticize me for my correct legal analysis made about 2 years ago. I know the law, and I write and I speak the truth. Second, there was never any evidence of conspiracy, meaning an agreement to commit a crime in a substantial step taken by the Trump people to commit the crime. This is Law School 101. Those are the two elements you need to establish conspiracy. You learn that in day one of law school. So I was right. My columns were correct. I was right on the law. No evidence of collusion. That's what the Mueller report has reported. No evidence of collusion. Now, they'll say insufficient evidence of collusion because they're trying to cover the 2 years and the $30 or $40 million wasted. But when they write insufficient evidence of collusion, they really mean no evidence of collusion because first of all, collusion is not a crime. And secondly, they presented no evidence of conspiracy. They presented no evidence of an agreement to commit a crime, nor do they present any evidence or find any evidence of a substantial step taken by a Trump campaign official to commit a crime. So I was right. Carl Hisro, I'm sorry you were wrong. And I'll wait here for your apology to me, given the fact that Special Counsel Robert Mueller has concluded what I concluded a couple of years ago. So will the antitrust lawyer Carl Hisro of Susquehanna Township publicly state that I was right and he was wrong? Okay, that's enough of my Carl Hisro diatribe for today. Back to my Mueller diatribe. Now, in his executive summary, Mueller explains he did not examine collusion because that word doesn't exist in the Crimes Code. He then explains he examined whether there was any coordination because the order appointing the special counsel instructed the special counsel to investigate any, quote, coordination, end quote. Newsflash, coordination is not a crime either. That's why this entire investigation from the day the Rosenstein issued the appointment letter is a fraud. Rosenstein directed special counsel Mueller to investigate coordination. Coordination is not a crime. Coordination is not a criminal term or offense. You can look through the Crimes Code. You're not going to find the crime called coordination. So the entire basis for the criminal investigation is absolutely bogus. And Bob Mueller was appointed to conduct a criminal investigation into non-criminal conduct, collusion and coordination. And Mueller, instead of rejecting the appointment, as he should have done, because, by the way, the FBI, by the time Mueller was appointed, the FBI had conducted this counterintelligence investigation for a year and hadn't found any crimes committed by the Trump campaign. Mueller should have Rosenstein should never have issued a ridiculous appointment, appointing a special counsel to investigate a non-crime, and Mueller should not have accepted the appointment. Prosecutors cannot investigate you for committing legal actions. It's not the way the American justice system works. In any event, instead of rejecting the appointment as he should have done, Mueller accepted the appointment. He launched this investigation into a non-crime. And then 2 years later, at the end of his investigation, he has to announce that he found no criminal coordination, whatever the hell that means. Then he admits coordination is not a crime. Bob Mueller himself admits that, and he admits the word is not used in criminal law. So get this. He makes up a definition for coordination, and then he investigates Trump and Trump campaign officials for that. Think about that. Here's what he writes. We understood coordination. Who's we? The royal. I love the royal we. We understood coordination to require an agreement, tacit or express, between the Trump campaign and the Russian government on election interference. So Bob Mueller, in his report, after admitting there is no such crime called coordination, and it's not a word used in the criminal law. Maybe Carl Hisro in antitrust law uses the word coordination, but this is a criminal investigation. So what does Bob Mueller do? He makes up his own definition. He makes up his own definition for coordination, and then he investigates Trump and Trump's campaign officials for possibly committing the non-crime of coordination based upon the definition that Bob Mueller came up with himself. How would you like that? How would you like to be at home? You get a knock on your door, and it's the FBI, and they say, Mr. Smith, we're going to investigate you for something that is not a crime. And you say, oh, my goodness, how is that possible? Well, we're just going to investigate you. And you say, well, what are you investigating me for? And they say, well, there's not a word for it in the crimes code. It's not a crime. And I know that we're required to investigate crimes. We're going to call it coordination. You say, well, oh my goodness. So you're investigating me for coordination. And you quickly look through your crimes code, because everybody has the crimes code at home in their library, and you don't find coordination. And you say to the FBI, you say, well, how do you define coordination? And the FBI says, we're going to define it. And then but maybe we won't tell you what the definition is, but we're going to make up the definition of coordination, and then we're going to investigate you for that. And by the way, when we question you about whether or not you coordinated, which is a made-up crime, if you lie to us, right to jail. So what do you think, dear John Smith? Not John Smith, he's a friend of mine from Arizona. Mr. Smith, in my hypothetical, is this the way the American justice system is supposed to work? And by the way, pay close attention to Bob Mueller's definition that he made himself for the alleged, but in fact non-crime called coordination. I'll read it one more time. We understood coordination to require an agreement. We understood coordination. Where is he getting this understanding from? He's just making it up. And he's the special counsel. He's the former director of the FBI. Okay. We understood coordination to require an agreement, tacit or express, between the Trump campaign and the Russian government to interfere in the election. That's Bob Mueller's definition of coordination. You know what's missing from that? His definition does not include the substantial step element that is necessary to establish criminal conspiracy. He takes it out. He makes it even easier for himself to bring charges against Trump or Trump campaign officials for the non-crime of coordination based upon the definition he created himself. More about this when we return from a brief commercial break. You're listening to the Marc Scaringi Show.
Now back to the Marc Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. We're talking about Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report. I've read the executive summary of Volumes 1 and Volume 2. The question is, did President Trump obstruct justice? And I promise in the last 12 minutes of the show, we're going to get into the obstruction part of this. That's Volume 2. I've got to finish Volume 1. We have some callers in the phone banks. And I apologize, the callers who want to talk about a topic that's not on the Mueller investigation or the Mueller report. We're not going to be able to get to you today because I have limited time, and I want to get through what I want to say about the Mueller report. We're talking about how Mueller invented his own non-crime called coordination. And by the way, thank you for calling in anyway. But maybe next week we'll take your calls. So call back next week. Mueller invented his own crime called coordination, which does not exist. Then he created his own definition for coordination, which only exists in Mueller's mind. And here's how he defines coordination. It means, according to Bob Mueller, more than two parties taking actions that were informed by or responsive to the other's actions or interests. So that's now a crime. When more than two parties, I guess you have to have three people, taking actions that were informed by or responsive to the other's actions or interests. So let's say J.C. Floyd is out on the dance floor at a discotheque, and he's dancing to the Bee Gees' Stayin' Alive, and there are other dancers on the dance floor, and they're moving in coordination. Their actions are informed by or responsive to the other actions and movements of the dancers. That's coordination, according to Bob Mueller. That's a crime? I don't know. It depends upon the quality of the dancing, maybe. Who knows? But we prosecutors cannot make up their own crimes, cannot make up their own definitions, and their definitions can't be so broad as to include everything under the sun. That's what Bob Mueller did. And by the way, he still had to admit he couldn't find coordination. So no collusion, no conspiracy. Collusion is not a crime. Conspiracy is a crime. And he finds no conspiracy, and then he looks at something else that he invents called coordination, And in his definition, he takes out the substantial step element that's necessary for conspiracy. And then he says, well, we didn't find coordination either. We applied the term coordination in that sense when stating in the report that the investigation did not establish that the Trump campaign coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. Now, to Mueller's credit, the acting Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, who appointed him, instructed him to investigate coordination, which is not even a crime. I mean, it's so mind-boggling that's the origin of this investigation. So Bob Mueller is saying, hey, I was appointed to investigate coordination, whatever the hell that is, so I'm just going to make up a definition and say, there was no coordination. In any event. All right, so I've got to move on to the obstruction component. That's in volume 2 of this interesting report. And so let's talk about obstruction of justice. Did President Donald Trump obstruct justice? Call in 717-540-0580. We have a few minutes left. I want to know what you think. Now, there are various definitions. There are various crimes in the United States Crimes Code in the area of obstruction of justice, but basically, obstruction of justice is designed to punish individuals for subverting or thwarting the administration of justice by, for example, suborning perjury, destroying or concealing evidence, or by inducing witnesses to give false testimony. Suborning perjury is a mouthful, but that means getting somebody else to perjure themselves. It doesn't include you perjuring yourself. It includes you getting someone else to perjure themselves. Destroying or concealing evidence, or by inducing witnesses to give false testimony. Now, let's go through Mueller's points that he raises. Okay. On June 14, 2017, Mueller writes, the media reported that the special counsel's office was investigating whether the president had obstructed justice. Press reports called this a major turning point in the investigation. While Comey had told the president he was not under investigation, following Comey's firing, the president was now under investigation. For what? Obstruction of justice. How did the president react to this news? Well, with a series of tweets criticizing the Department of Justice and the special counsel's investigation. Is that obstruction of justice? Can you, the target of an investigation, criticize those who are investigating you? Absolutely you can. You have a First Amendment right to criticize the government, even if they're investigating you. It may not be a wise idea. You may want to try to make nice with the people who are prosecuting you, but you have the absolute First Amendment right to criticize the Department of Justice, the Office of Special Counsel, the United States Attorney's Office. You have that right. President Trump has that right, doesn't give it up. He doesn't give it up when he assumes the office of the presidency. On June 17, 2017, Mueller writes, the president called McGahn, his lawyer, at home and directed him to call the acting attorney general and say that the special counsel had conflicts of interest and must be removed. McGahn did not carry out that direction, however, deciding that he would resign rather than trigger what he regarded to as a potential Saturday night massacre. Now, this is all under obstruction of justice. Did the president basically obstruct himself? Because, by the way, the president, and only the president, is empowered by the United States Constitution to make sure that the laws are faithfully executed. It's not Bob Mueller's job. It's not Jim Comey's job. It's Trump's job, the president's job. Those men work for him. They're under his authority and jurisdiction. So if he wants to bring up the fact that Bob Mueller has conflicts of interest, which it very well it could appear that he did by hiring Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation lawyers, the president can do that. It's not obstructing justice to bring up a conflict of issue matter. And the president has the constitutional authority to hire and fire the United States Attorney General, the director of the FBI, and certainly then the special counsel. In any event, Mueller writes, efforts to curtail the special counsel's investigation. Curtail it. 2 days after directing McGahn to have special counsel removed, the president made another attempt to affect the course of the Russia investigation. Now, by the way, the president did not fire McGahn for not suggesting to Mueller that he recuse himself based upon a conflict of interest, which is apparently what the president was communicating to McGahn. That never happened. McGahn did not make the communication, and Trump did nothing about it. Mueller continued to conduct the investigation. So how is that obstruction of justice? In any event, Mueller writes, the president made another attempt to affect the course of the Russia investigation. And as we said, that's not obstruction of justice. The president, as the chief law enforcement officer of the United States of America, charged by the Constitution with the responsibility to take care that the laws are faithfully executed, the president has that power. He can affect the course of any investigation by the FBI or the United States Justice Department. That's the president's, not only is it his authority, it's his responsibility. So Mueller is way off base when he is attempting to insinuate that the president obstructed justice by attempting to affect the course of the bogus Russia investigation. Then Mueller talks about efforts to prevent public disclosure of evidence. Stop the press. Mueller is insinuating that Donald Trump may have obstructed justice by making an effort to prevent public disclosure of evidence. Obstruction of justice is not about tweaking press releases. Obstruction of justice is about thwarting the administration of the judicial process by suborning perjury, by bribing judges, by bribing prosecutors, by attempting to influence witnesses to lie and make false statements. That's what obstruction is about. It's not about telling your press secretary what to write in a press release that goes to the public. In any event, Mueller writes, before the emails became public, the president edited a press statement for Trump Jr. by deleting a line that acknowledged that the meeting was, this is the Trump Tower meeting, was with an individual who Trump Jr. was told might have information helpful to the campaign, and instead said only that the meeting was about adoptions of Russian children. When the press asked questions about the president's involvement in Trump Jr.'s statement, the president's personal lawyer repeatedly denied the president had played any role. Well, that's the president's personal lawyer denying the president had any role in making the press statement. But listen, Bob Mueller, tweaking a press statement, making deletions, making edits, creating it, drafting it, that's a statement to the public. It's not obstruction of justice. It's not the president lying to the FBI. It's not the president lying to the prosecutors and investigators or influencing others to lie to investigators and prosecutors. It's issuing a press statement, for crying out loud. This is what Bob Mueller was focused on. I mean, there's so much more to talk about, and I'm sorry I didn't get into all of the obstruction of justice bogus claims. And I will get into that, I'm sure, next week, because this issue is going to dominate the headlines for the foreseeable future, because this is what the Democratic Party has to hang their hat on. And as I wrote in my recent column in Penn Live and the Harrisburg Patriot News, Bob Mueller should be ashamed of the fact that he punted on the issue of obstruction of justice. And that is his responsibility was to say whether or not there was probable cause to prosecute or not prosecute. That's what he should have said. And he obviously did not have probable cause to prosecute on obstruction of justice, or he would have. But instead, he punted the issue to Congress to set up impeachment hearings against the President of the United States. And that's why I have written so strongly against Bob Mueller for what he has done to the presidency and to the American people. We'll talk more about the Mueller report next week on the Marc Scaringi Show. And by the way, happy Easter. Enjoy your Easter holiday. Hi, this is attorney Marc Scaringi. Every Saturday afternoon at 1, thousands of central Pennsylvanians listen to the Marc Scaringi Show on WHP 580. It's a program about state, local, and national politics from the point of view of putting America first. If your business or organization would like to reach my listeners, you can advertise on my show. Promote your business on the only weekend political show in central PA.
Call 717-657-7770 and talk with Jason to promote your business on The Marc Scaringi Show.